The scent of cinnamon and cheap perfume clung to the shutters like secret hands. Within, the brothel's murmurs rolled against the wooden bones of the house. Laughter pitched a little too high, a lute's string plucked out of tune, the slow slosh of wine in an inattentive cup. Outside, the dusk had turned the street of silk the color of cooled embers. Horses stamped and steamed, tack creaking. Somewhere beyond the crooked roofs, the red keep rose like a dark thorn against a sky matted with smoke. Ned Stark sat his horse with the rigid patience of a man who had learned long ago to hide discomfort behind stillness. He could not help the mild distaste that tightened his jaw at the sight of rose lanterns and painted shutters, at the smell of it, the cloying sweetness at war with the honest reek of horses and the salt tang from the Blackwater. He had come because duty had 1,000 shapes, and one of them, this night, looked like a brothel and a man who made his living from the loose stitches of other men's honor. Jory Castle waited at his bridle hand, as steady as the summer stars. The men of his household guard sat horses around them, close under the eaves. A few passers-by glanced toward them and then away, as city folk always did when they sensed the heavy weather of power. "A little longer and he'll think himself safe," Jory said low. Ned considered the door. He had peered past the lacquered frame not an hour ago, had watched Caitlin set aside her hood and smile at him with that private quickness that always found him unhelmed. She had concealed herself cleverly in the city with the help of Peter Baelish. She had believed she could trust him. Ned had wanted to. He could still feel the warmth of his wife's hand. He could still hear the threads of her worry twining with names. His son, Bran, a knife, a promise of old blood guilt, a letter from a sister too warped by fear to be the sister he remembered. And when Caitlin was gone, Baelish had laid a dagger of words against another man's throat. He had smiled with the easy charm he wore as easily as silk and had said the dagger belonged to Tyrion Lannister. He had made it seem like sport. He had put a name to a blade and folded his hands. Ned had learned the weight of names in a land where winter crushed foolish speech from men's mouths with cold and hunger. A name could be a death. He had let too much happen in King's Landing already. The city made men speak fast. He needed to slow it. "Bring him out," Ned said, "alive and with respect. But bring him out." Jory nodded once and slid from his saddle with a smooth economy. Behind him, Will and Heward and the others loosed straps and checked buckles as if they were about to ride into a sudden storm. The brothel's door breathed open and swallowed Jory in a tide of warmth and the faintest sweet cry, and then closed again. Ned sat with the patience of a winter tree. Baelish did not keep him waiting long. A man does not prosper in King's Landing by being slow. Jory reappeared with Peter between him and Will, flanked by two of Ned's men who looked like they'd have preferred to carry him by the neck. Peter wore a charcoal doublet and a plum cloak that made him look like he had been plucked from a painting of autumn. He smiled. Of course he smiled. Baelish's smiles were as plentiful as the brothel's girls and cost him less dear. "My lord hand," Peter Baelish said with soft surprise, as if he had been expecting a hawk and had found a dove on his sill. "Have you gone astray? I could send for a map." Ned reined his horse up a notch to look down at him. "You told my wife a lie meant to put a city to the sword," he said. Peter lifted a hand in clean innocence. "Such scowls. If I had lied, I would have made it charming. You named Tyrion Lannister as the owner of a dagger you lost to him. You made bold to swear to it, and in that oath you would set House Stark and Lannister to clash. The king's peace is not a thing for your wagers." Peter's eyes moved like the flicker of candlelight when a door opens. "I named the man who won a wager from me. That is all. You said you lost to him. You say a great many things," Ned said. "By the king's authority and the office of hand, I place you under guard for the perversion of justice and for swearing falsely before officers of the crown. You'll be held until we set your words in the scale." A shadow stepped out from beneath the eaves and made a polite, silken cough. "So heavy a scale, Lord Stark? Might a humbler set of balance weights suffice? Words are birds. They fly in flocks and cannot be caged for long." Varys was a soft-bellied moon in a robe pale as milk. He had a smell like powdered flowers and a calmness that did not belong on any street of any city Ned had ever known. let alone this one. The eunuch's eyes were damp and kind and without mercy in them at all. "It is a poor night for birds," Ned said. "They will stay with me until I am done with them." "And who would let them out again?" Peter said, and there was no humor in this smile now. "You? Will you ask them to sing of you when they go free?" "Take him," Ned told Jory. "We go to the Red Keep." Peter did not fight. He protested with elegance and offered 3 compliments to Caitlyn's courage and 2 jests at Ned's honor that might have drawn bluster from other men. There was a quickness in his eyes, though, a man used to doorways and ledgers finding himself pushed down a corridor he did not know. It stiffened his shoulders. Jory kept him by the elbow with the polite, iron gentleness of a man guiding a guest to his seat at table with a knife hidden beneath the tablecloth. The ride up past the Dragon Gate was slow and exhaled heat. The city was a maze of smells and damp. They wound beneath banners they had not earned. Painted stags and lions, mermaids with hair like straw. The Red Keep rose and swallowed the sun. When they passed beneath its gatehouse, Ned could almost believe they were slid into the heart of something old and patient and blind. The guards stiffened to see the hand lead in a member of the small council bound by courtesy and the hands of Starks. Whispers bloomed like mold behind them. Ser Barristan met them in a stone passage that breathed cool. He had the white cloak over his shoulder and a sword at his hip and the battered hands of a man who had lived his life inside steel. He looked from Peter to Ned and left his question in the air like a flag. "He perjured himself," Ned said. "I will question him as hand. He will be treated as befits his station until I am done." "Lord Baelish is the king's master of coin," Barristan said, cautious. "Then the coin chest will not be spent on lies for a day or 2, Ned said. "Will the white swords oppose me?" "King Robert is afield woodwise," Varys murmured. "He will hunt boar and forget ink. The queen will not forget. It may be a cold night for those without blankets." "I obey the king's hand so long as he obeys the king," Barristan said slowly. "Shall I summon a member of the council to witness his questioning?" "You may witness it yourself, if you will." Ned meant it. He trusted few men in this place. Barristan's honor had the unfashionable habit of meaning the same thing each day. Peter took a breath, light as a laugh. "You set a brave table, Stark. Will you pour the wine?" "In my lands we drink before we judge," Ned said. "Here, it seems, men drink instead of judging." "You'll find we do both," Peter said. "Sometimes with the same cup." Ned turned from him. "Jory, the Tower of the Hand. Secure him. No one without my word." "And my men," Peter's voice teased. "The men who keep honest tallies for the crown? They will keep their tallies at home tonight," Ned said, and walked away with Barristan at his shoulder and Varys flowing like water ahead of them. The tower seemed taller than it had the day before. The city crept into rooms like a cat, purring and indifferent and capable of silent injury. The night stretched. Ned sent Jory to set watches with the king's own guard at the base of the tower and in the passage that led to the Hand Solar. He ordered the handmaidens to the kitchens and the pages to their pallets. In his chamber, he unbuckled his sword and felt the weight leave his hip like an old friend sliding from a bench. Caitlyn was gone, returned to the road north by secret ways that Peter had whispered down like sweetmeats. Ned went to the small hearth and put the steel of his palms toward it. He thought of the letter his wife's sister had sent, accusing the queen of murder. He thought of a boy in a sickbed far away, and his heart made that small hard sound that hearts make when pressed. Varys did not wait to be bidden. He poured himself wine as if he were drawing out a vein of or at his own mine. "Do you mean to hold Lord Baelish at dawn as well? The queen will summon words. Grand Maester Pycelle can conjure a paper to chide you with." "Pycelle can choke on his paper," Ned said. "I'll be done with Peter before morning warms. He will answer to his oath. When he is broken down to truth, this lie about Tyrion Lannister ends. The lion does not turn north for a thing that never happened." Varys lifted his cup, looked into it as a man might look into a pond to see if fish stirred. "So severe, my lord. And in the king's city, you are iron-given feet." May the gods keep you from rust. Ned turned to Barristan. Sir, I would have your eyes while I ask my questions. You shall have them, Barristan said simply. But be warned. I've heard words like arrows whispered down these halls. The queen does not befriend shame, and the man you hold knows every seller of bolts and every hand that draws them. Then we will smoke out his storehouses, Ned said. I will have Pycelle send for Lord Renly. Let the council know what I do and why. And send for Janos Slynt, the commander of the city watch? Varys's mouth softened in pleasure, as if someone had told him a fine joke. He answers to the hand as to the king, Ned said. I would know whether he is a man I can depend upon, or one who sells his oath by the fist. He sells it by the purse, Varys said, and made a regretful click with his tongue. This city is expensive. Oaths even more so. Ned thought of Winterfell, the sound the gods would made when the wind cut through the heart tree, the snow's pale patience, the faces of men who had taken their oaths in the sight of old eyes and did not think to unmake them for silver. King's Landing was a place where oaths had mirrors. Then I will look the man in the eyes, Ned said, and decide whether to put him where he cannot sell to anyone. Send for him. Not long after, Janos Slynt stood before the hand. He had shoulders like a butcher's block and small clever eyes set in a face that had learned long ago to listen for coin. He bowed with the boldness of a man who bows often and has found bowing profitable. My lord Hand, Slynt said with that careful deference so beloved by men who changed masters many times and always came away with their fingers. You and yours keep the king's peace, Ned said. Do you do it for him or for whomever hands you your pay? Slynt smiled with his teeth hidden. We keep it for the city, my lord. She is an old lady with expensive habits. She likes to be courted. You will put 20 of your men at my command this night, Ned said. They will be loyal men, married if you can find them. They will stand outside the Tower of the Hand and in the yard. No one comes or goes without my leave until sunup. Janos Slynt blinked. 20? That's a thick blanket for a man who intends to sleep light. Do you object? Ned asked softly. Not if the coin is right, Slynt said. He glanced at Varys, who was examining the light through a bottle as if he had never seen glass before. The gold cloaks serve for bread like other men, Slynt added. You will have your bread, Ned sighed. And if any loaf you eat is bought for you with another man's silver, I will open you down the seam and see which coin falls out. Do you understand me? Slynt looked at him with those little eyes and weighed his words as if he were measuring spices at a table. Then he nodded. Clear as bell peal, my lord. That is good, Ned said. You are dismissed. When the commander of the city watch had gone, Barristan said, He's a wary one. He is a seller, Varys corrected with bright approval. Never mistake the trade. But you have done a bold thing tonight, Lord Stark. Taking Lord Baelish into your keeping would be like putting your hand into a sack of eels. Then I will not let them wriggle until I am ready, Ned said. They took Peter Baelish to a chamber below the Solar, one made for the keeping of valuable tools that were dangerous to leave lying about. It had no window and one door and a rope that could ring a bell in the kitchen if used. Such bells often rang in the Red Keep for myriad reasons. Ned took a stool and sent the others back 2 paces. He looked at Peter and waited for the man to grow uneasy in the quiet. In the north the wind did this work for you. Men there were not used to the stillness of stone. In King's Landing, silence discomfited men who had lived too long in rooms where the air was always full of talk. You are good at making words run where you want them, Ned said at last. We will walk them slow this time. Is this how you do it on your windy hill? Peter answered. A stool, a stair, and the gods will put wisdom in your mouth. Tell me of the dagger. Peter's hand described the air as if drawing the blade. Dragonbone hilt bound with silver. Pretty enough thing. Valyrian steel makes knives that would open the throat of a city. You said it was Tyrion Lannister's, Ned said. You say you lost it to him. I did lose one to him at Joffrey's name day tourney, Peter said easily. What dagger? That one. Ned's voice was iron. Say again that you swore before my lady wife and myself that the dagger you claim was used against my son was the same you lost." Peter's eyes moved. He was measuring the cage. "If I said so, it is because I lost one just like it to the imp. It is difficult to track the family trees of daggers." "We will not have jests," Ned said. "You swore to it." "Why?" "Because I wanted you to believe a thing." "Which thing?" Ned asked. "That the Lannisters had grown too bold," Peter said finally, and the return to his honesty felt like a man finding his footing on a tilted deck. "You do not need me to tell you that. King Robert sows 1,000 seeds a day and never asks which crop of bastards he harvests. The Queen does not believe herself a field for strangers' grain. You know this. I know you try to make men do your work for you," Ned said. "You wanted war." Peter spread his hands. "Not war. Leverage. Houses are doors with bolts. Leverage opens them. A quarrel between wolves and lions makes other men think what they can get while great beasts scratch. I would have taken my share in the confusion as wise men do. You arrest me before the harvest." "You lied to my wife," Ned said, "and nearly set her to an act that would bleed the Riverlands white. She trusts easily where she believes she sees a piece of home. She did not see you as you truly are. A man whose pride would make him salt the fields if he could name them after himself." Peter's mouth curved like a closed hook. "The Lady Catelyn trusted me because once I bled for her and she saw the blood. You bled because you challenged a man you could not stand beside," Ned said, "and lost. The wounds of boys are not oaths." Peter's eyes cooled. "Do you think your honor a shield against cunning? Stark honor is such a lovely thing in a world full of knives. You should take it off sometimes and see how light you feel." Ned leaned forward, slow as winter. "I took it off once in my youth, for a man I loved. The city tricked him and took his head. I won't be fooled by city tricks again." "Then watch the Queen," Peter murmured too quickly. "And her brother. Watch the boys with yellow hair and count how many are really the kings." Barristan Sandor snapped his attention like a sword to a sound that wasn't there. Varys grew very quiet. Ned's heartbeat seemed to notch itself in the grooves of his ribs. He had already chased that scent in his head and in old books. He had found Gendry, a boy with the king's jaw and blue eyes like winter sky, bent over an anvil with arms like young trunks. He had read names and hair colors in a dusty tome that had felt like an old man's beard in his hands. The pattern that had crawled out from under those pages had been a cold thing. "You know a great many things," Ned said, "and now you know how a door looks from the inside. You will stay where you are. At dawn, if you have aught else that smells of truth, you may send for me. If you send for anyone else, I shall assume that you prefer the black cells to my kindness." "The black cells have their own kind of kindness," Peter said with a pale smile. "They keep men from the sun. The sun burns." "I am from the north," Ned said. "We prefer the cold." He left Peter with Jory and 2 gold cloaks at the door. He slept badly, walked twice to the window and looked out into darkness like a full basin, and dreamed once that the heart tree at Winterfell had opened its red mouth and spoken to him in a voice he had not heard since he was a boy. At daybreak, he sent Jory out to Tobo Mats for the boy-smith. He sent a page to Pycelle to draw Lord Renly to a short council. He sent a bird to Dragonstone, where Stannis Baratheon had retreated with his frowns to an island stronghold and a brood of grievances that had only grown in the sea air. He wrote heavily, with the hand that had signed so many winter orders in a neat and careful script, and said a king's sons must be sons. He sent another bird to Wint, Urfel, where raven keepers would turn its little black feet to alder and give it seeds, and then send the weight of his words to his lady. He asked her to go to her sister softly and to hold her own hand from easy anger. Catelyn was already on her way through the crowded roads of the Riverlands. The inn at the crossroads was thick with wagoners and farmwives and men who carried half their possessions on their backs in sacks that had seen better years. She wore a hood and kept her hand over the purse that held the dagger, as if the bone hilt itself could whisper the truth to her if she pressed her thumb to it long enough. In the common room, a dwarf with mismatched eyes rolled dice for a knot of sellswords and a pair of fat merchants. He had the weary grace of a man who had been laughed at his whole life and had learned to take his portion of laughter and coin with the same sideways smile. Caitlin felt the old tremor go through her, the puppet string that ran from anger to righteous impulse. The dagger was heat in her palm. She had been told he owned it. But the man who had told her that had eyes like a cat looking out from under a tablecloth at a roast. She watched the dwarf a long time, until the wind and rain that had soaked her cloak had dried, and the itch of action had eased. Then she slipped away in the half-light of morning and took the road toward the Vale rather than call the room to witness and her sense of outrage to serve her better feelings. She did not seize him. The words of her husband had come to her in the night like a touch across a bed. Wait for me before you strike. She humbled her heart and saved her house. In the Red Keep, Ned gathered the council without the master of coin. Renly came in with green silk and a smile he wore like armor. Pycelle drifted like the dust of old libraries. Varys floated to his seat, a pale blossom. Barristan stood by the door, white and speaking sword. Lord Baelish is in my keeping, Ned said at once, before Renly could lift a jest to his lips. He swore a lie that would send lords to killing. I will have done with it before night. Renly laughed and then did not. Gods,
Ned.
One does not arrest Peter for lying. If that were a law we held to, the court would be a silent place. My wife was persuaded to take a Lord of Lannister into custody on his false word, Ned said. She did not thank the gods. But I will not have small hands placing sharp things in the dark and then drawing us all to bleed. Pycelle made a sound like ancient leather being folded. Lord Stark, the master of coin, is a valuable man. His knowledge of the city and its concerns is... Ned cut him with a look. He will answer to the truth or he will learn to love the dark. Renly laced his fingers. He had a boy's beauty and a fox's cleverness, and he let both do service for too much. If this is about the boy, Ned Bran. It is about the king's peace, Ned replied. Everything is until it is about the king, Renly said lightly, but his eyes were not light at all. My brother hunts. He grows drunk and bellows and pretends the wine is blood and the boar is... Never mind. He stands in need of better counselors. That means you, yes. And those who know where the city bleeds. Peter knows. You cannot keep him long. Long enough to learn what he would have done to my house, Ned said. Varys sighed and smoothed his robe with thoughtful fingers. If we make a habit of imprisoning the graceful, my lord, the Red Keep will need new dances. Still, a tiresome little problem made less tiresome by being done swiftly. Perhaps a word to the queen to let her know you have no intention of making a spectacle. I intend truth, Ned said. If the truth cuts, it will not be because I paraded it up and down the streets with bells. Lord Renly, yes, you said once you loved your brother but would not die for his folly. You offered to sweep away one boy and set another on the throne before the king's own body was cold. Renly's lips tightened. Still a shock to hear plain words in this city. You must know, all of you, what we risk. Cersei does not bring up children. She hones weapons. She will not consent to anything that robs her of power. She has the Lion of Casterly Rock at her shoulder. If you mean to act, you act quickly and cleanly. Do not arrest the man who keeps the ledgers while letting the woman who writes fates walk the halls. I will speak with the queen, Ned said, and with the king upon his return. Until then, I will gather what proof I require. And if the king never returns? Renly asked, almost idle. Do you know something? Barristan asked, voice flat. Renly shook his dangling sleeves as if shaking rain from a hedge. Only that he drinks like a man who has found a way to be 16 forever and rides like a man who isn't. If he returns with a boar's tusks under his ribs, the game at court changes. Prudent men make their moves before the pieces begin to roll off the board. If the king dies, his heir is... Pycelle began in an old man drone. I know who he is, Ned said. And if the king dies, I will read his last words and obey them. He is not dead. He bit the last word. They adjourned with bad grace. Ned set his shoulders and went down to his little prisoner. Peter was not sleeping. Of course he was not. Men like Baelish took their rest in the hearts of other men's confusion. On his stool, Peter looked like a peddler who had found his way into a lord's counting room and was pretending he had come to sell his wares there all his life. "Is your honor satisfied yet?" he asked, as if the words were gloves he was trying on. "No," Ned said. "We speak of the boy Bran. You will tell me where you got the dagger you named and renamed." "I won it. I lost it. How should I know where it travels?" Peter was almost bored. "What were you to gain if my wife took Tyrion Lannister?" Ned asked. "Chaos," Peter said, and there it was. The same flat, almost wistful lit. Flea truth he had offered in passing and dressed up as cleverness. Change. A bit of smoke. All those ladders. "I would push you off one," Ned said. And that drew a little breath from Baelish's nose that said for the first time that he recognized something in Ned's eyes that could not be wheedled away. "You are done here for now. I will keep you. When King Robert returns, he may bless or curse me as he likes, and I will answer." "You won't be answered if he dies," Peter murmured. "The Queen will step heavier than any boar ever did." Ned's guards stared at the floor as if the stone might tell them what to do with that. "Then it is good that the gods do not love boars," Ned said, and left him to the candle and the square of darkness where the door shut him in. He found Jory in the yard shedding dust from his boots like a man shedding poor sleep. Behind him stood a boy with arms like hewn sycamore and up-tilted blue eyes. Gendry, Tobo Mott's apprentice. The boy met Ned's gaze with that clear, open defiance of orphans who have nothing to fear except being turned away. "You knew a man," Ned said. "He bought you in a sense. He paid the smith. He was a big man," the boy said. "Like a king." "He is the king," Ned said. "You will not say that in the street, but you will tell me of him. Did he ask you whether you had the name of a mother? Did he look at you as if someone I know had been reduced into you?" The boy shrugged. "He looked at me and nodded, that's all. He left a pouch heavy enough to pull the board toward it. Master thought he meant me for the watch, but the man said he did not." Ned saw Robert in his mind as he had been when they were boys, wild, golden with laughter. His hands quick to a woman's waist or a sword's hilt. The king's seed was indeed full of strength. Each of his bastards wore his face more faithfully than the pale princes upstairs. "Do as your master tells you," Ned said gently. "Keep close to him for now. If anyone asks after you, no one exists by your name. Go. Jory, see the boy back safe. No one follows him." They were all threads in a net he was casting around the queen. The habit of waiting until you had gathered enough threads was one that had saved wolves in winter. It did not always serve in cities, but he could only be the man he was. When Robert returned to the city the following day, his humor was green-edged. He had cut his thigh on a branch trying to prove to his own memory he could ride like a boy, and then he had been made to sit for Pycelle's attention while the old man primed his mouth and gloated over herbs. He shouted for wine and for a different physician and not his, and the thunder in his head followed him into the small council chamber like a bear on a chain. "You arrested the Master of Coin?" he said as soon as he saw Ned, half offended and half delighted. "Seven hells, Stark. If you must do your duty confoundedly, you could at least do it with a little ceremony. I might have tossed him in myself." "He lies as an occupation, not a bad habit," Ned said. "He set words in my wife's mouth as if they were pears on a platter. He would have us all at each other's throats." Robert waved a goblet. "What does he say? Let him talk his way out. I'd enjoy it." "He says nothing that satisfies," Ned said. "He all but admits his intention. He says we should watch the Queen." "Everyone should watch the Queen," Renly muttered under his breath. "Some with more relish than others." Robert laughed and clapped him hard enough to jar his teeth. "You love women like I love wine, little brother. Both will sour a man if he drinks too much." "Wine is cheaper," Renly said. Ned kept his eyes on Robert. "I would speak with your grace privately." Robert's mood soured like milk left in the sun.
"Guts, Ned."
Every day another whisper. "If I only hunted boar and drank, you'd chide me. When I try to sit a throne, You bring me a sack full of snakes as if I am a snake eater. What is it now? Ned told him without preface. He told him of the book and the colors of hair. He told him of a boy in a smithy who had his face on him like a seal on soft wax. He told him of Cersei's children and what they were not. Robert went very still. He had always been a man who moved, if not with cunning then with momentum. To see him still was like seeing a river in winter before the ice had had time to find its skin. His chest rose once, heavy. "You come to me with this," he said eventually. He did not meet Ned's eyes. "I do," Ned said. "And you ask me to believe that the Queen put horns on me not with a man but with a shadow," Robert said in a voice that was suddenly young and dangerous. "How many times did you see them? Jaime and Cersei." "I saw them together once and understood the shape of the thing only later," Ned said. "I am not blind, and Jon Arryn died following the same smell I smell now." Robert closed his eyes. He lifted the cup and then did not drink. He set it aside. His hand trembled once and stopped. "Gods forgive me," he said. "I have been a boy playing at king all my life. I made a crown with arrows and laid down the bow when it began to bite. If this is true." "It is true," Ned said, and the words felt like stones in his mouth, but they were the only stones he could afford. Robert opened his eyes and they were raw. "What do you mean to do?" "Take the children into safe custody," Ned said. "Send the Queen to Casterly Rock to be watched by her father, who must bear the shame of what he let grow in his house. Keep the peace in the city. Call Stannis from Dragonstone to take what is his. Then decide whether to draw a blade for it or to make a council of great lords and let them look on your seal and the boy's hair and the dead man who came before me." Robert scrubbed at his beard and laughed without joy. "Stannis, gods. He will make the throne a counting stool. But he is my brother, and he does not lie. I will write. I will name you protector and write a calm. And that the Queen is to be held and my children with her until I return from this damned hunt. If I return in a box, you do it without me." He penned the words in a thick hand, cursing the quill and his own clumsiness. Pycelle powdered the wax and dripped more and behaved as if he were conducting rites. When Ned held the parchment, he felt the weight of the realm in his hand and knew it was too light. He did not go to the Queen's chamber alone. He took Barristan with him and Renly for the name and Varys because he would hear eventually and it was better to let him hear true. He took no gold cloaks for the first talk. In the gardens that pretended at wildness above the dry earth of the keep, Cersei Lannister waited like a lioness whose den has been approached too often. Jaime stood at her shoulder in white, as if the color could disguise him from Ned's truth. "Lord Stark," Cersei said, "do you arrest Peter Baelish because he did not flatter the North correctly? Even he could not charm the wolves with coin." "I have a command from the king," Ned said simply, and handed her the parchment. He watched her as she read. Her face did not change. She had learned long ago how to make her beauty a lid. Jaime read over her shoulder and his jaw tightened. The parchment was a small thing. It was also the only thing in the world at that moment that mattered. "You would take my children from me?" Cersei said in the tone a woman might use to say, "You would cut my hair while I sleep." "I will keep them from the tongues of men until the king decides their fate," Ned said. "Robert decides nothing," she said with contempt. "He drinks and he sows and he laughs and thinks laughing is ruling." "You thought ruling was lying," Ned answered. "Now there must be another way." Jaime took a step forward. Barristan mirrored him. Ned did not lower his eyes from Cersei's. "I will not debate with you," Cersei said. "I will tell you a thing. If you come for my children, you will make war." "I am preventing war," Ned said. "I am stopping your father from throwing the Riverlands into fire and my people in the north into a winter that begins with swords." "You arrest the man who keeps the purse strings and you threaten the Queen," Jaime said, smiling with mouth and not eyes. "You mean to stop the wind with your hand." "The king's wind is behind me," Ned said. "Step aside, Ser Jaime. Go back to the throne room you were sworn to guard." Jaime laughed quietly. "I guard what I choose to guard." "Cersei," Ned said then, because the Godsplice woman had always loved to hear her own name. Take your children and go to your father's house. Do it with grace and you will be safe. I will send the guard with you. Do not make me come with soldiers." Cersei's eyes bled a kind of slow heat. Men are always surprising in how foolish they can be when they think themselves just. Robert will fall off his horse and break his neck any day now. You play at the rest if it makes you feel better. But hear me, Stark. Do not put your finger near my cubs and expect to pull back anything but blood." She turned with a flurry of green silk and left. Jaime watched Ned, and there was the same bitter admiration in him. Ned had seen the day they put the crown on Robert's head, and Jaime had stood at the foot of the Iron Throne like a man who had spent too many hours in the sun without water. Jaime bowed just enough to insult and went after his sister. Renly released a breath like a laugh. "Well, that is done. You are madder than they say in the Reach, Ned. And I include the stories with wolves in them." "It must be done," Ned said. "Barristan, find Ser Mandon and Ser Ares. They will take command of the Queen's Guard with you. Varys, send to Commander Slint for his men. We will place watches at the prince's doors and at the Queen's. She will not leave the keep. She will leave if she wishes." Varys breathed, almost tender. "The keep has doors you have yet to dream of. But if she leaves, we will know it. And if you act quickly enough, you can catch even a fox in a new field." Ned slept like a man under ice and woke to a city that seemed to hold its breath. The gold cloaks he had summoned beaded the corridors with brass buttons and small nervous eyes. Barristan's white stood like painted bone at the gate to the Queen's yard. The boys were kept to their rooms, with maids fetched from the kitchens who had been hired by the Queen but were paid by the Crown to keep them within. There is a difference. It might have been enough if not for boars. The King's hunt rode at dawn and returned before dusk with laughter turned ragged, and the story carried by Lancel Lannister's trembling hands like a wine cup that sloshes and spills. The boar had gored the king high and torn at him, and Robert had torn back at it with a spear and broken laughter and a river of wine roaring between his teeth. By the time they laid him on his bed, he was as white as the sheets would be if old women did not boil them with blue and prayers. Pycelle buzzed like an overly cautious fly and cut and cupped and bled. Ned stood by the bed and watched his friend, fat and grieved and suddenly mortal. Robert's eyes found him through pain and brandy. "You were right, we were boys," he rasped. He coughed and blood ran out his mouth and into his beard, and he laughed and choked on it. "Damn, I thought to fight a boar and ended fighting myself. You will do what you promised. Make it square. Write your letters, Lord Stark. Tell Stannis I said to come and bring his scowls and his laws. Tell everyone a king's word is a thing. And tell my wife, tell her to go to hell. No, do not write that." Ned took his hand. Felt like stone warming in the sun. Robert closed his eyes and slept and woke and slept again. He died before dawn with the light wanting to be born and the city already a whispering mouth. It was quick in the end, and not quick enough. When the sun came up, it seemed colder then. It had any right to be in this southern place. They covered the king with a sheet, and the sheet settled like a fall of snow. There was the letter naming Ned Protector of the Realm, heavy with wax. There was the knowledge that the Queen had more doors than he had keys. There were his daughters, pale in the morning, one full of tears she resented and the other hardening into some iron thing he did not know what to do with. There were 10,000 men in the city who would take coin from any hand that offered it. He did not go to the throne room in a rush. He went with Jory and Will and Heward at his back and Ser Barristan at his side, and the commander's gold cloaks filling the aisles like a river with a dam. On the Iron Throne, Joffrey sat with his mouth set as if this were all a game he meant to win by looking fierce. Cersei stood at the foot of the throne and wore white as if she meant to tell lies made of wool and smoke. Jaime, he was not at her shoulder. That was well. Renly stood off to one side, his hand idly on the melon-bellied hilt of his sword, his eyes alert. Varys waited with hands folded and a face like a kindly judge who would not have to hang many today. "My lords," Cersei began. "The king is dead," Ned said. "Long live the king. Long live the king." The room murmured, wary and hungry. "Robert named me protector," Ned said. He lifted the parchment. This is his command. It commands nothing, Cersei said, her voice smooth as cream. It does not name a date. It does not name a condition. It is a piece of paper given to a northern man who never understood how we do things here. It names me protector until the rightful king arrives, Ned said sharply. That is Stannis Baratheon. Joffrey is not the king. The words fell like axes. They were not new in his mouth, but they had never been so heavy. Sansa made a small sound behind him and caught it. Arya did not make a sound at all. Cersei lifted one brow. This again. This silly thing with the book. Men begot sons with dark hair. Men begot sons with fair hair. The world is full of boys with hair. It is full of books as well. We will not put our throats on a ladder for your pages. Barristan spoke, clean as a blade. He speaks truth. Jon Arryn died for it. And you strike at a queen because a dead man makes a ghost of your council, Cersei said. You do not know what you do, Northmen. You will drown the city because you will not be content to walk around its puddles. Ned shifted the parchment. Lord Commander Slynt, he called clearly. He saw Janos's eyes flick to him like mice. You will take your men and place her grace and her children under gentle guard. They will remain in their chambers until we have resolved this matter with Lord Stannis. Cersei's eyes snapped at that like dogs. Janos Slynt looked at Cersei and at Ned and at the purse of his life lying somewhere in the dim air between them. All the slow, careful work of the last days, all the measured words and heavy looks and promises of bread and the thin threat of broken vows, balanced on the tip of this man's tongue. Janos bowed to Ned. "Aye, my lord." And with that, he lifted a hand and the sigils of the city watch moved like a tide, surrounding the dais, a line of steel and tarnished brass between queen and throne and the rest of the realm. There was a sound like a held breath finally let go. It came from men in the hall who had been paid by other men to hold theirs until a different moment. But coin always has a shadow coin, a weight you cannot see. Varys's eyes turned to Ned and his mouth hid surprise in it like a piece of candied fruit folded into a cream. "Do not be fools," Cersei said. "Do not think you can do this and live. This is being done because we wish to live," Renly said. He stepped forward with a grace he had not earned and did not apologize for. "Your son is not the king, sister, by marriage. You can prevent bloodshed if you stop trying to draw it." Joffrey stood and stamped his small boot and looked like a boy denied a toy in daylight. "I am the king," he declared. "I will do as I." "No," Ned said, and it silenced the room more than shouting would have. He handed the parchment to Barristan, who took it as if taking a newborn and held it for all to see. "You are not the king. You are your mother's son." The hound had stood down by the steps, his face a ruin and his eyes clear. He looked up at Joffrey with a bone-deep commiseration that made his scars seem a different kind of wound. For a moment Ned feared that he and Barristan would be forced to fight him, that they would make a ring of swords with the city watch and something crude and sorrowful would happen in front of the Iron Throne. But Sandor Clegane merely lifted a hand and touched the boy's arm and said, "Best you sit, little bird. The dog doesn't bark when the pack turns." He took a step back and left the quarrel to men who wore silk. Cersei looked at the ring of steel and knew something of its price. She lifted her skirts like any highborn lady stepping into a coach and not into disgrace and said to Janos Slynt, "Then your hand on my elbow, Commander. We will see whose will is a thing and whose is only a word spoken with force." Slynt took her elbow. She let herself be escorted as if she had only decided to retire early from a banquet. Joffrey made one last bite of a protest, looked at Sandor, looked at the swords, and sat with knees that wanted to lock and a face that wanted to cry. Barristan moved with the queen because he had been ordered to. His face looked like a stone with weather on it. They put the queen in her chambers with her son and daughter and a white sword at the door and gold at the stairs and a quiet threat in the yard. They replaced her maids with older women whose eyes had seen too much to be frightened by black hair or cruel mouths. They did not parade her through the streets. They did not even ring bells. The city woke to a rumor that day the tea tasted like bad wine and filled bellies like hot broth. When word reached Tywin Lannister, it would bring with it more than curses. but that word would have to travel past closed gates and guarded roads. The Riverlands did not burn that day. Tyrion Lannister remained at table somewhere between inn and father's roof, flipping a coin between his fingers and wondering why the game everyone seemed to be playing had become suddenly quiet in the middle. Littlefinger sat in his little room and listened to the footsteps change in the hall. He had a gift for hearing sound and telling whether it was the noise of opportunity or the noise a trap makes while it admires itself. When Jory brought him water and hard bread and the quill he had asked for, he took them with good humor and dipped the feather and wrote letters to men who could not read them and to women who would never receive them. This had always been one of his amusements. Nobody understands a joke if they do not reach it. Varys came to him as if to a confessional and looked at him with something that might have been sympathy if sympathy had a price. "You misjudged the hand on the scales, my sweet lord," Varys murmured. "He arrests you and does not care whom he might offend." "Everyone and no one," Littlefinger said. "Starks are like snowdrifts. You'll be buried if you stand too long." "And yet," Varys said softly, "the drift holds for now. A strange thing to see chaos adjourned." "Look beneath the table," Littlefinger advised. "The knives are still there." "Always," Varys said, almost pleased. Ned Stark moved through the days that followed like a man walking a tightrope in a wind that changed every time he lifted his foot. He sent for Stannis in the king's name, and a raven flung itself into the sky from the rookery with a message tied to its small soul. He sent another to Storm's End for Renly, though Renly stood no chance in law so long as Stannis breathed. But Renly had wealth of friends, and it was better to make a river run into your basin than to let it cut you a new channel from your house. He sat with Pycelle and made the old man write 14 letters to those great lords who would not forget the last war's lines. Mace Tyrell, Hoster Tully, John Royce, Lord Manderley, the Hightowers. He wrote also to Lord Arryn's widow, for love of Catelyn and because the veil had always been the hinge the door swung on. Catelyn received her husband's letter in a room with thin walls that let in the sound of mountain wind. The veil was as beautiful as she remembered and more dangerous. Her sister Lisa greeted her as if Catelyn had come to steal something she could not name and would not set down. Lisa had red-rimmed eyes and a voice too soft to carry anything but fear. She had a little boy who clung to her breast and bit at it with teeth. He should have turned on meat by now. The boy did not have a father and he did not have a horizon either. "They will try to take him from me," Lisa whispered. "They will try to make him a ward of their whim. Baelish used to say." She stopped and her face shaped around the memory of the man who had taught her to say the things she wanted to believe. "Never mind what Baelish used to say. He is not here." "Lord Baelish is held," Catelyn said, letting the words fall like a coin to see how they were received. "He is questioned for false counsel." Lisa blinked like a waking rabbit. "They arrested Peter?"
Ned Stark arresterat Petyr.
"I never thought, not he. Men will surprise you when honor sits in the same room with them," Catelyn said, and wished her voice was kinder. "They will try to take my boy," Lisa said again, and the grinding little wheel of her fear turned back to its groove. "You think you have come to talk to me of justice? I only hear wolves in the night. Go back to your north, sister. Leave the high places alone." Catelyn left her at last with a sadness that new grief always makes somehow heavier than old sorrow. She went to the Ares rookery and put a letter into the world that told Ned she had not seized the dwarf and had not believed the man who would have made her do it, and that the Vale was a mountain that had decided to be a house only for itself. She sent a bird to Riverrun as well, asking her father to be ready if the world began to thunder. News travels faster than birds when men taste it on the air. The merchants in the Street of Sisters whispered that the queen had been locked in her rooms for weeping in white. The whores in the Street of Silk laughed behind their hands and said Littlefinger had been taken for not sharing his winnings with the right players. The small folk watched the gates and counted men in strange colors entering and leaving and tried to make numbers do what words would not. In the Red Keep, the kitchens turned out platters of meat as if feeding an army, and the servants moved like dancers and pretended not to see the peculiarities of the days. Sansa Stark woke each morning with the same ache in her chest and the same prayer behind her teeth. that this had all been a play she had misread, and that the boy with hair the color of sunlight would call for her and smile and make things simple again. She moved through the day with the careful grace she had learned from ladies whose lives were spent in rooms. She stitched and drew a bow across a lute string and practiced the words of courtesy to a mirror that did not make the face cleaner than it was. She visited the queen in her rooms, because she could not keep from bringing herself to that edge, and found herself before a woman sitting in a window with her back to the sun, and her hands loose in her lap as if she had broken all the bones in her fingers. "Your Grace," Sansa said timidly. Cersei turned her head. She smiled at Sansa with a softness that might have been gentle if not for the edge on it. "Lady," she said, I wondered if there is aught I could bring," Sansa murmured. Cersei shook her head Varys. Lightly. "Do not bring anything. Never bring anything you cannot take away again." Sansa did not understand and thought perhaps understanding was a thing that happened only once you had bled and then bled again. She left and wept afterward in a small closet where the mops hid their faces in a bucket. Arya learned more words for killing from Syrio Forel. She learned to make her feet forget they were feet and become leaves falling and shadows at noon. She learned to stare at men with bigger blades than hers and not make her eyes bigger in answer. She listened to the corridor's whispers as easily as to the water. When word came that her father had gone to take a blade from a boy's hand in a room of iron, she did not run toward it. She waited by the little window in the practice room and watched the pigeons. Syrio laughed at nothing and made her jump higher. On the third day after Robert's death, Lord Stannis's reply came as a black scrap on a night wind. It was all hard edges and scowl written down. He did not congratulate anyone. He wrote that he would come. He wrote that law was not a thing for genteel debate. He wrote nothing of war, and it lay between his lines like iron under packed snow. On the fourth day, Renly did something unwise with speed. He left the city with 12 good men and more gold than one man ought to ride with. He left a letter that said he loved his brother and would not fight him, and that he loved his people and would not watch them be put under a harrow by any man named Lannister or Baratheon who thought his rights were a cudgel. He did not write the word crown, but the word sat behind the writing like a grin. On the fifth day, Tywin Lannister's lions began to stir. The river roads toward King's Landing saw more dust than they were used to seeing. Janos Slynt reported that a ship had left from the city at night with a hull full of men whose names did not like to be said out loud, and that it had not returned. Varys brought whispers of a man in white seen in a coppersmith's lane in the dark of midnight, and he put the words Ser Jaime into the quiet as if dropping an earring into a bath. "Shall I send to him?" Ned asked Barristan. "I have served long," Barristan said, "and I have never seen a Kingsguard respond to a summons he did not want to answer." "Then we will hold quiet and tighten our belt," Ned said. "We will not let the Queen out. We will let the city see that no lions are in the street. We will wait for Stannis." "Tywin will not wait," Varys warned, and he was right. The raven from Riverrun came with a small white string tied to its leg, where Hoster Tully's maester had put it, so that Catelyn might tell her husband it was from them. It said that a host gathered in the west, and that the mountain that rides had been seen near a ford where no one had expected to see him. But no fires had yet been set, and no villages chopped open like melons to see what was inside. The old lord of Riverrun wrote that he had a cough and a caution, and that his red-bannered rivers would not be blood if he had any breath left to refuse it. "We have days," Ned said. "Not many, but some." When Stannis Baratheon came at last, he came as if carved from the same single piece of iron he had always been. He brought a modest escort, no parade, no festival of banners, and he came ashore grim-faced to be greeted by men who were not sure whether to cheer for relief or to brace for scolding. He went straight to the Red Keep and straight to the chamber where the small council waited, and if the room had been full of dogs, he would have thrown down verses of law instead of bones. "The boy is not Robert's," he said by way of greeting. "None of them are. Tommen looks like the baker's child. I will have the throne." "You will have it without blood if the gods are kind," Ned said. "The gods are never kind," Stannis said. "Pycelle, have you done your letters?" "I have written what we spoke," Pycelle said. "We will put it before the lords of the realm," Stannis said. Those who deny can take ship to Casterly Rock or to your miserable north if they prefer it, Lord Stark. Those who agree will bring their arms. Those who abstain can be counted after. Ned has the queen under ward, Renly said from his place. Returned the very morning Stannis landed with a charm on his lip and silence for once behind his eyes. Good, Stannis said. Keep her there. When Tywin Lannister arrives, he will offer to end the matter by single combat or by writing on paper. Refuse both. We will keep a sword at your side, Ned said, and a city between you and the Rock. I have done what I can to keep the Watch loyal. Janos Slynt would sell his mother, but he knows which buyer holds the sharper knife. Knives do not interest me, Stannis said. Oats do. The Reach will not love you, Renly said almost idly. The Stormlands might because they have to. The North will keep their word out of habit. The Vale is asleep, Varys sighed, and dreams of a man whom Lord Eddard has seen to. Small mercies. The Vale will wake when it is safe, Ned said. My wife's sister is under strain. A poor time to be soft, Stannis said. Ned's voice roughened. There are children under that softness. Children are not stones that fix a wall, Stannis said. They are bricks that must be put where the load is heaviest. We will not speak of women. Very good, Renly murmured, and Stannis's eyes told him he would prefer not to speak to him at all. They moved like a machine with many parts and not enough grease. Messages went out. Answers came back like arrows, some feathered with green, some with gray. Lord Manderly sent a fat acceptance by way of a fat letter. Lord Royce of the Vale sent a restrained note that did not say no and did not say yes, because the Aerie was a woman who had put furniture in front of her own door and would not always let those in her house speak to guests. The Hightowers asked Chew Estians about law and never wrote the word king in the usual way. Tyrell sent fruit and charm and delay. From the west came the silence of a cat crouched in reeds. Could not last. No one expected it to. The first Lannister men to test the river road found the bridges closed and a company of Goldcloaks with orders to ask their names and count their buttons. Janos Slynt took breakfast that morning in a small room with a hatch that overlooked the road, and nodded as if the world had at last remembered how it was supposed to turn. He was secretly afraid of his wife's tongue and of the nights when he woke sweating. He had coin hidden under a loose stone where his children would never find it, and he kept his oath to the hand because he liked to keep his throat. Cersei did not rage. Rage makes noise. She spoke in a very quiet voice to men who had been paid to stand at her door and to women who had been paid to pour her baths. And she learned the times when the Goldcloaks changed and the names of the men who liked to toss dice in the kitchen for half an hour when they were not supposed to leave their posts. She learned that Sansa came most afternoons with a look like a woman trying to call a cat who liked milk but not hands. She learned that her brother had left the city with a purse heavier than the sword he had refused to draw, and that he had promised to split the world open from the other side while she worked from this one. It made her smile just around the eyes. "Do not trust all men in cloaks of gold," she said softly to Joffrey, "especially when they look as if they believe it will turn them to lions. When the day comes, you will call for Sandor. He will come. He was made to come when the horn blows. He will cut a path for you. A cut is not a door, but it is as good as one." Joffrey nodded and tried to look as if he could hold thoughts in his head without them falling out like marbles. Cersei looked at him and wished for a second that he had iron under his tongue instead of greed. Then she folded the wish up and put it away. Ned knew she would find a way to a door because he had always known she was a woman whose hands could read locks. He tightened, as men in wooden fortresses in the dead of winter tighten, by bringing things inside, by layering blankets, by making the food stretch, by having men walk the walls with their cloaks wrapped and their eyes open in the hour before dawn when sloppiness makes its best arguments. He kept the King's Guard on a short tether by keeping Barristan very close and letting him speak more than he let himself. He put Syrio Farrell's name into the list of men allowed near his daughter's doors, which made the lists different and made things safer in an odd way. Stannis's men took control of the gatehouses in the king's name. They did it with parchment and with the kind of voices men use when they are telling a mule what to do. It was not pretty and it was not quick. It was, however, effective enough that when the first courier came breathing red from the west to say that Lannister men had been seen on the Rose Road with too many spears to be merely traveling, the gates could be closed and nests prepared on the walls. The city is an animal that pretends to sleep until it is bitten. In the Vale, Catelyn Stark stood on a balcony and watched a sky so clean it had never learned to share. She held a dagger in her hand. It had a dragonbone hilt and a blade like a line drawn by a god who wanted to divide night from day. She had turned it in her fingers 1,000 times and seen faces in it that were not her own. At last, she went to Lysa with it and set it on a table between them. "This is the knife that tried to open my son," she said. Lysa looked at it with a revulsion as if Catelyn had set a live snake on her table. "Take it away. It may help your boy not put his foot in a snare when he has to step out of his cradle," Catelyn said dryly. "Look at it." Lysa looked and shook her head and looked again. "It is beautiful," she admitted, and that at least was true. "Peter said." "I know what Peter said," Catelyn snapped, and Lysa flinched. "Peter is a man in a hole who thinks himself a builder because he can dig it deeper. My husband holds him. He will face what he has done. My son lies in Winterfell with eyes that do not open. The city is trying to decide whether to become a sword. Do not make it harder for me to keep my children breathing." Lysa cried. Catelyn did not. She held the knife and thought of the road home, and wondered whether the world would let her travel it. At dawn on the day men still speak of in King's Landing when they mean to say fate noticed us once. The bells did not ring because no one quite dared to ring them. The queen had bribed 2 men with eyes like tired oysters. One of them had taken the money. The other had taken the money and told his captain. The captain had told Janosslint, who had thought of his wife and decided he liked being alive more than he liked either coin or a story in which he appeared puny. He sent double watches, and when Cersei's men came with their quiet feet and their knives in their sleeves, they found twice as many gold cloaks in the corridor as any sensible man would have expected. It would have been a bloodbath if not for Sandor Clegane. He came around the corner at a run with a sword in hand and a scowl that was the first honest expression many in that hall had seen in days, and he planted himself between Joffrey and the nearest blade and shouted an obscenity that made even hardened men blink. Then he laughed. It shocked them. A man who laughs does not fear. Fear is half of any fight. "Come on then," he said like a butcher to a pig. "Come on and make it messy. The boy wants to see whose guts look prettiest on the floor." It took 2 heartbeats for men to realize what he had said. Then Janosslint put his whistle to his lips and blew it hard enough that a man's head must have burst somewhere. And the gold cloaks moved as one body. The queen's hired blades cut twice and then realized they were not cutting through a puddle but through a tide with rocks in it. They fled if they could, and the hound did not chase them far. He turned his back deliberately on a fleeing foe, something no man would do in any other corridor of this place. He came to Ned afterward and shrugged. "If I'd wanted him dead, I'd have put him in front of them," he said. "But I'm sick of being told to kill. Make a better king than this or make none." "I do not make kings," Ned said. "The gods have that sin." "You put your boots in the prince," Sandor said, and he was right. He went back to stand by his boy and tell him that kingship was a thing that tasted like cold steel. Cersei did not weep when they came for her. She smiled at Ned with something like respect and said, "You have made yourself many enemies. Try to enjoy them. They are better company than your friends." "Your father knows how to write letters too," Ned said. "He will think twice before he writes one with fire." "He thinks twice and burns slower," she said. "Do you know how slow that is? Ask your river lords. Ask the bones." "We will end this before he lights tinder," Ned said, which was not entirely within his power, but he had to speak as if it were. The great council that followed was not as great as those chroniclers loved to pretend. Lords do not love to travel to King's Landing in times when arriving there may mean not leaving. Many sent proxies. Many sent letters thick with courtesy and thin with content. But enough came. Hoster Tully carried in on a litter, Orton Merryweather with a hat so brave it frightened sparrows, Lord Redwine with his nose full of wine. They gathered in the throne room and they looked at Stannis Baratheon and judged him as men judge a tool. They looked to see how well the handle fit their hand. Ned laid the book on a table. He did not read from it as a priest reads from Scripture. He put a finger to the list of men who had lawfully sired sons with the line of hair they had passed on, and he let the lords come and look. He brought Gendry and stood him where the light fell on his cheek and let them see a face they had seen on banners. He stood Tommen and Myrcella and let them be beautiful, which they were, and he did not make them into exhibits more than necessity demanded. And then he read Robert's letter naming him protector in a voice that did not break. Stannis spoke, and Renly spoke, and Pycelle sighed and said things that had already been said. Mace Tyrell did what men like Mace do. He looked for a path that let him keep his promises to everyone, thereby breaking all of them. Lord Redwyne made a joke no one laughing in the right places heard. Hoster Tully listened with a face like bark and whispered to his steward that he had seen worse and had known that the worst had often come wrapped in good smells. At the end of the day they did not shout. They signed. Enough of them signed that a man could look at the parchment and feel that law had found flesh to wear. When the High Septon raised his hands and said that a boy cannot be made king by words that contradict both law and sight, he did not thunder. He declared, "It is how judges do when they mean to leave men their dignity while cutting them off at the knees." Joffrey stood stiff and white and watched the names fill up a page that had been meant to be his. Cersei watched and did not blink until the very end. When the guards came, she kissed her son once, hard, like a brand, and let them lead her away. It is a falsehood that women like her scream. Some keep their voices for places where men cannot hear and cannot use the sound for weapons. Tommen was quiet because he had always been quiet. Myrcella cried only when she thought no one would make a story from her tears. When the banners over the Red Keep changed, it was with clumsy speed. You cannot teach men to love new colors faster than you can sew. You can only unfasten old cloth and tie up new. Stannis Baratheon took his seat on the Iron Throne with a face that looked as if it might cut him. He did not smile. He did not threaten. He said the law would be the law and that men would keep it or learn what keeping meant. By mid-morning, a man who had cut 3 purses in the Street of Flower was missing a hand. By noon, a paper announcing a new levy for ships had been posted at the docks and was being read by men who had not known they could read and found that they could when the thing in front of them had a price on it. Ned stood to one side and watched the city begin to take the shape of its new pressure. He had seen trees that had survived blizzards because their roots went deep and their branches bent. He hoped the city had roots and not only hovels grown one atop the other. He rested a finger on the hilt of his sword and went to his daughters. Sansa knelt without fuss and kissed the ring on Stannis' hand as she had been taught to do for kings. She made herself an ornament because she had always believed in ornaments. Stannis looked down at her and grunted and moved his hand away slowly, as if a cat had rubbed against him and he did not know what to do with the feeling. Arya stood at the same distance and bowed with the quick, thin stiffness that Syrio had taught her, polite and dangerous. Stannis watched her and did not know what she was and did not try to find a word for it. That afternoon, Ned took his daughters into the Godswood at the Red Keep, which was a poor thing, dry, southern, with trees that did not know how to keep secrets. He stood before a foreign heart tree and tried to make his prayers fit a trunk that had not watched him grow. "Your mother is in the Vale," he said. "She will come to you when she can." "She should come now," Sansa said before she could shape the thought into something prettier. "She cannot," Ned said, and Sansa set her jaw in a way that meant she would not cry now be. Ut would later and would hate the tears. Arya flicked a leaf with the point of an imaginary sword and looked up at him. "They would have killed you in there if the watch had gone the other way." "Yes," Ned said. "Why didn't you have Syrio in the room?" Arya demanded, as if she could have arranged the world better. "Syrio fights men. This was not a day for men," Ned said, which nearly made sense and was not meant to. "You will not do anything brave for a week," he added, turning to fix her with a look. "I will do brave things when they need doing," Arya said, honest and impossible. Ned laughed then, short and soft, and pulled her to him. He pulled Sansa too, and they stood with their father in a city that had decided to do a different thing than it might have done, and the wind moved through leaves that did not care about the movement of kings. He thought of Winterfell and of young Bran's eyes closed against a ceiling that was not his choice. He thought of Jon Snow, far to the north and perhaps already stood on a wall that made men small, and of the way the world had a habit of reminding kings and hands and children that it rather liked ice and wolves and strangers in the night. He did not forget Petyr Baelish. He went to the little room and stood over the little man. "You will go to the Vale and answer there for your counsels," Ned said. "You will stand before a sister who knows your name too well and not well enough. You will tell her why you made a letter out of a lie and sent it south to kill a man in truth." "I will do as you say," Petyr murmured. "The way I always do." "You never do what anyone says," Ned said. "True, but men love to believe I do. It keeps them from looking at my hands." "You have nothing in your hands now," Ned said, and that was not true. No man ever has nothing in his hands, if his hands are his mind, but it felt good to say it and to make it a limit on what Petyr could pretend. They put Petyr on a ship with an escort in mail that wanted to be heavy and sailed him east to the Bight, where gulls show men how to take fish from other men's mouths. The Vale was not welcoming. Lysa Arryn had hung her valley with fear like a curtain. But Lord Royce met the ship with men who had kept their iron under oil and had not had to draw it on kith in years. Petyr Baelish looked at the mountains and smiled as men smile when they come home and know home is the place that made them what they are and cannot unmake them. And he bowed to men he would have liked to sell and said he was sorry with his eyes. In the Red Keep, Stannis held his court and made enemies in the exact measure that his duty required. He stripped Janos Slynt of his trappings and offered him a place in the Night's Watch, because men must be kept where they can do no further harm, and because Stannis loved the law more than vengeance. Janos accepted because he loved being alive and because the North had a way of making men think of their breath as a thing of value. Yoren came and cut hair and took men away to cold air with a grim humor that was nearly kindness. Renly left again, this time with less flourish and more purpose. He went to Storm's End and then to Highgarden, where he smiled at Margaery Tyrell and found in her a mirror that did not frighten him. The Reach considers its roses very seriously. It would listen to his courtship and decide later whose petals to shed. For now, there was a king in King's Landing who was not a fool, which made many men unexpectedly thoughtful. Cersei and her children were sent west under guard and without insult. The road to Casterly Rock had never seemed so long, nor the rock itself so hard. Tywin Lannister received his daughter and grandchildren with a face like gold hammered thin. He looked to the east and weighed weights as men do when they are counting gasps rather than coins. He pulled lions together as men pull cloaks tighter when the wind turns. But the Riverlands did not burn, because Stannis sent word to Hoster Tully and put men in the crossings and set Lord Mallister to watch Seaguard with hawks. And Tywin bided, and biding worked because it often does and then abruptly does not. When Winterfell's first raven in many weeks came, it arrived exhausted and angry. It brought a hand like a child pressing a palm into frost for fun and then shrieking at the cold. Bran had opened his eyes. He had tried to say something about a crow and about falling and about a face that had looked at him out of a golden light. He had then slept and awoken with a look in his eyes that Catelyn had never seen on any of her children. A look that was old in a way that frightened her. She wrote this to Ned without poetry and with a mother's practical fear, and Ned sat with the letter and felt something in him stand up that had been lying down. He began to think then of men in black and cold winds and things that do not care whether kings have crowns or not. He went to Stannis and spoke of the watch and of supplies and of men who have to be sent even when they would be of more use closer to hand. Stannis listened because the law makes you listen, and he sent grain because men have to eat to keep the law. He also sent a strict letter about vows, which the Lord Commander at the Wall read aloud and then laughed at because men who have long lived in hardship know how to make humor out of other men's seriousness and gratitude out of their gifts. No one called it peace. The streets were still a rumor. The gates were still an argument. The halls were still drafty in a way that winter is, even when the sun burns too brightly on courtyards. But the sky over King's Landing held no smoke that did not come from cooking fires for a time. The ships that left from the Blackwater were not all fledglings of one house. They carried wine and saffron and news. They carried men sent to the Wall and boys fleeing debt. They carried Petyr Baelish to a place where they thought stone would do what men had not. Ned watched the city live and did his duty as his father had taught him to do it. by walking and by looking and by speaking words when they needed speaking and by holding them in when they would only taste good and do no good. When he could, he went to the yard and watched Sirio with Arya and tried to learn what it meant for a daughter to become a blade. When he could, he took Sansa to the sept and let her kneel before a mother carved by the same hands that had carved 10,000 other faces, and he helped her practice the art of thinking of two different things at once: how to be an ornament and how not to be a victim. He dreamed sometimes of winter woods and of a heart tree whose face looked like a man he did not know but would one day have to meet. He did not dream of an axe falling because he had heard it fall for other men. If there was a price to be paid for keeping his head this time, he did not yet know its exact coin. There were days when he thought of Peter on his mountain and smiled a little grimly. There were other days when he thought of Cersei behind her father's walls and wondered which of them was more dangerous when deprived of a city. He wrote to Catelyn and asked her to come if she could. He wrote again and simply told her he missed the smell of her hair. He did not write that he was lonely in rooms with too many echoes. She would have known it anyway. When the first snow fell in the north that autumn, it fell early that year and had a dry taste to it. Ned stood on the balcony outside the Tower of the Hand and let the evening lay its hands on his shoulders. The city lay below him in a black puddle of roofs and whispers. Somewhere, a queen who no longer wore a crown was teaching a boy how to hate better. Somewhere, a little clever man who had never learned to stop wanting was carving a hole to fit himself more neatly. Somewhere far to the north, a boy who had fallen found a way to walk, and a crow that was not a crow told him the sky was a thing you can stand on if you forget fear and remember names. Syrio Farrell told Arya to be a leaf. Renly counted roses and obligations and made a court in a place that had never loved iron. Stannis sharpened the city into something that could be used. Varys counted birds and waited for a winter that would require a different kind of song. Janos Slynt went to the wall and told lies about how he chose it. He learned the old truth that cold listens to no lies. Ned thought, as night took the last of the west, of Robert's laugh and the way it had collapsed under its own weight at the end, and he whispered to the dark words that were not prayers and were not quite promises. We have made a different road. It may not lead where we wish, but it will not lead to the same gallows. The bells did not ring. The city slept, and in that sleep, it kept learning all over again how to be ruled by something other than fear of a boy's cruelty and a mother's ambition. In time, men would write about these weeks and lie as men always do when they put ink between the teeth of memory. They would make of it a clean thing that had never been clean, or a bloody thing that had never quite bled. But for now, it was only days. And Ned Stark had lived through enough of them to know that days were the only things men truly had, and that each of them had to be put in its place with a slow hand. He turned from the rail and went down to his daughters. The torches threw their weary light on stone. The air smelled, as ever, of smoke and something sweet beneath it, the city's constant hint of rot and spice. He walked until he could hear the soft scrape of Arya's practice and the careful murmur of Sansa's prayer. He listened, and then he stepped into the room with them, and the door closed and held.